Happy Tuesday to you. I am still in Ottawa in a hotel room, flying back today. Thanks to those of you who saw my video yesterday about the very difficult day I had. My aunt passed away in a hospice here in Ottawa, so I flew back quickly for 48 hours and was part of the many loved ones who were around her bedside as she passed away. And so that was yesterday. Shot a video all about that and about St. Stephen. We are a crew. Today, though, I am ready to get back into the weeds of the agenda from the past committee of the whole meeting last Wednesday. So here it is, almost a week later. We've had a couple of interruptions topically in terms of videos. But today I want to provide kind of a quick crash course primer for borrowing money because that came up in the treasurer's report. Remember, the treasurer is one of the two mandatory positions that a municipality needs to have. We need to have a treasurer and a clerk. This, of course, is spelled out in the Local Governance Act. Now, we do have a CAO, a full-time chief administrative officer who oversees the staff. And at the committee of the whole meeting, this is when this council has decided to ask for the reports from the different department heads. So we do hear from our treasurer, and today is going to be, like I say, diving into the weeds of what it's like for a municipality to borrow money. As a regular person who maybe has had to borrow money at one point or another, you go to the bank, maybe get a line of credit or a loan or a mortgage or that kind of thing. Well, you'll be comforted to know that when it comes to borrowing in municipal politics, as a municipality, it is highly, highly regulated. So let's just get to the report that will kick off why I'm talking to you about this. Our treasurer did mention at the meeting, and you'll see if you click on their report, and I will put the link that flies you straight to the report in the description if you're watching on YouTube and Facebook. First of all, there were details about the annual audit. Again, you'll be comforted to know as a resident that every year the municipalities get audited by an outside organization, an independent body, to make sure everything is copacetic, goes through all the receipts and everything. So that's about the financial transparency piece. But really, then our treasurer started to talk about, and this is where you just see a couple of paragraphs in a report like this, and you can let it fly over your head. But when I see something like this, I want to drill in, and I see it as something that often needs unpacking. So I started to, really unpack this, and that's what I hope to do for you. Your mayor needs a full understanding of this kind of thing. Again, not to usurp all of the important knowledge and work of the treasurer and of the CAO, but because the council ultimately approves borrowing. Again, it is highly regulated, but the council needs to understand what's going on, and the mayor, the job description of mayor is to explain to residents exactly what is happening. And so that's what I want to do here. I'm kind of demonstrating that that's the kind of mayor I am going to be. Now, when you get to the report, a couple of paragraphs here, it says, as noted, the MCBB application was submitted prior to the March 4th deadline. So again, you see an acronym like that, and those who are working in this are up to their eyebrows in it all the time. But what is the MCCBB? Well, that's where now I turn my attention to. It stands for the municipal capital borrowing board. Okay, there's going to be lots of kind of jargon like this, and I want to get it right. What is the MCBB? That is the board set up by the province of New Brunswick to authorize borrowing. It oversees the application process for a municipality borrowing money. Then it goes through hearings. Yes, you need to have a hearing as a municipality to explain why you want to borrow money. Then there needs to be a public notice issued so that residents like you and I can see and understand that our municipality is borrowing money. Again, we pay into this corporation that we live in with our property taxes, and so we get to know and have a say through elections if we're on board with the borrowing of money. And then once that happens, then the municipality can move forward and issue debentures. I will talk about that. Isn't this fun? I love this stuff. You know, I do hear, I don't want to get into a side, but a lot of people say, Mark, all you talk about is the hot button issues like housing, which is not true. So why don't you talk more about budget and potholes and things like that? So then I'm pivoting here to this today. Hope you're enjoying it. And then a lot of people say, well, that was super, like watching paint dry. But again, this is the kind of thing where your counsel is handling this stuff so you can go on living your life. You want to know someone is understanding this and making good choices around it. Now, let me skip over to the Local Governance Act so you understand the constraints around a municipality borrowing. So now that you know that the MCBB exists, the Municipal Capital Borrowing Board, and they oversee the process of borrowing money, the Local Governance Act, which this is video 72, you've heard me mention it probably at least 50 of the videos, right? It really does govern and regulate what can be done on so many things in the municipality. So let me just read you borrowing powers. So it says, municipalities do have borrowing powers, but here are some interesting constraints. A local government shall not in any 1 year borrow for its current operations any money in excess of the sum of 4% of the budget of the local government. So that's operations. We don't need to deal with that today. If you're borrowing for operations, you're probably not in a really great financial position. Operations is the day-to-day, I've mentioned before, kind of less than 1 year costs, shorter than 1 year costs, everything from salaries to pencils to fuel in the trucks, that kind of thing. That's operations budget. But there's three kinds of budgets in a municipality. You got your operations budget, you got your capital budget. That's where you buy things that are much more expensive, think long-term assets. Again, think pavement and pipes, but of course the pipes are water, right? So then we have a utilities budget, okay? So operating, and then capital, and then utilities, and the pipes, replacement of water infrastructure can only come from the ratepayers, those of us in the urban ward who actually pay for our water services. If you're in the rural ward, you don't pay into that. You're not responsible for the upgrades of the infrastructure for that or anything like that. Now, again, those things, when you see in the Local Governance Act, you see operations, you see utilities or water or capital, you got to pay attention to those labels. Now, here's one that is relevant, though, for capital. The capital budget. Subject to subsection 4, which is the next paragraph, a local government shall not in any 1 year borrow for capital expenditures any money in excess of the sum represented by 2% of the assessed value of real property in the local government. So this is interesting because, when you look at our budget, we have about $800 million of assessed real property. The province assesses our property value in our municipal borders. You can see in our capital budget, it was around $800 million. So then you look at 2% of that is the municipality is not allowed to borrow for capital expenditures any money in excess of 2% of the assessed value. Here's the one that's really prescient for us, though, relevant to us today. The total amount of money borrowed by a local government for capital expenditures shall not exceed 6% of the assessed value of real property. So we can't be borrowing money in excess of 6% of the total value at any time. So again, if we have $800 million of real property collective, if you're a property owner, business, commercial, residential, whatever, in the municipality has to say we can't borrow more than 6% of that. We can't be in debt for more than 6% of that in total. And the 2% is the amount that you cannot borrow more than in any 1 year. So, of course, $800 million, 1% of that is $8 million, 2% of that is $16 million. So we are talking about borrowing about $5 million for the road resurfacing in St. Stephen. So that does put us within the parameters of the Local Governance Act. So just wanted you to understand that that is highly regulated, and you still, if you want to borrow, need to put a package together. This is now back to the Treasurer's report, because you'll hear how the process is borne out by the Treasurer and their department here in St. Stephen. So back to the MCBB, the board application was submitted. Subsequent to the submission, various questions have been asked by NB finance analyst. because when you borrow money in this way from a municipality, will typically go through the Municipal Finance Corporation of New Brunswick. So a little bit more on that, although this video is getting long and I'm getting into the weeds here. So the treasurer then says response has been prepared and forwarded to the finance analyst who is presenting on our behalf. So we get a finance analyst to go present to the board. There is this hearing to make our case of why we need to borrow this money and how much we're borrowing and how it stays within the parameters of the Local Governance Act. The board will hear our case. And then the treasurer's report here does mention that the notice was posted, as I mentioned in the procedure, the notice so that everyone finds out that the municipality plans to borrow. It was put in an edition, the April edition of the Courier, so the word got out on exactly what was being borrowed and the street resurfacing projects, etc. Now, there are a couple of acts, as you could imagine. Anytime you take a step in anything related to municipal politics, there's probably an act for it. Local Governance Act. There is the Municipal Capital Borrowing Act that sets out the process of borrowing. The Local Governance Act that I just read said here's the maximum amount you can be borrowing in relation to your budget and your real property assessment. But of course, the Municipal Capital Borrowing Act has this procedure that involves the board. And then once it is approved, so let's say the municipality gets approved to borrow this money, then the municipality of, say, the Municipal District of St. Stephen can issue a debenture, which is kind of like, you got to think of it as a bond, a very long-term bond, which we put together, and we basically say we're selling this bond, this commitment to repay. We need $5 million, and we will repay it with X amount of interest. And then typically we trade that off to the New Brunswick Municipal Finance Corporation, okay? And then there is a whole set of regulations, the Municipal Debentures Act, where, you know, we have to pay that back to the Finance Corporation as set out in the regulation. So hopefully that was clear as mud. If you're interested in that, awesome, fist bump. If you're not, maybe you just got the Coles notes there, the briefings of, we're going to borrow money, the treasurer is on it, it's within all of the parameters. This is why I was saying we need a governance model in the Municipal District of St. Stephen, which we've never had, where you get explained as a resident. We understand the problem or the procedure of what's going on, then we plan it, and this is, we plan to borrow money. So we've got two things going on, resurfacing, and then part of that is the plan to borrow money. And then we deliberate borrowing the money, as we've seen council do. I've been going to council meetings for 2 years and seeing that happen. We really need to do this, okay? Then we adapt and adopt the resolution to borrow the money, and now to build it. And as I said before, build it. Just because that's stage 5, it doesn't mean it's going to happen. So here we're trying to build these roads, but there is a procedure to follow out and continue to watch and be informed of as a resident. All right. Tomorrow we'll get to the rest of the reports. I will be back home by then if all goes well. BuildUpStStephen.ca, that's my priorities, my commitment, the action plan that I talked about here today. Take care of yourself today and your neighbor, and let's continue to build up St. Stephen together, including borrowing some money long-term to resurface our roads. See you tomorrow.